We publish our threat detection report every year to help the community. We get so much insight day to day on what threats are doing and how it works for us to detect them across a ton of customer environments, and why not share that knowledge?
One major breakthrough, I guess, is the emergence of cloud as a real serious threat vector. So the MITRE ATT&CK technique, cloud accounts, I think it ranked like in the 40s in our detection data set last year. We saw a 16 times increase from 2022 to 2023, which is the year that the report's based on. And it dropped from somewhere in the 40s to number 4 overall. So the reasons for that are, one is definitely that adversaries are targeting the cloud a lot. Another is that more companies are coming to us or individually are becoming more concerned about monitoring their cloud environments. We just have better visibility across the cloud than we did in previous years.
One of the things that was really interesting that we added this year to our report is a deep dive into industry trends. This is something that we get asked about all the time. What we've observed is that most of the threats we see are opportunistic. They don't care if you're a bank or you're a financial organization versus a manufacturing organization. There's not a whole lot of differentiation between industries for the threats we observe. That's actually great news, because it means that when we write a detector for something like Bootloader or Qbot, it's going to work regardless of the industry you're in and who's being targeted. Initial access via malvertising and search engine optimization is a trend that everyone needs to be paying attention to. We know there are lots of ways adversaries can get into environments, and I think as a community, we've done pretty well detecting phishing or other vulnerability exploitation. What we clearly saw as we looked at data for this year is that adversaries are using search engine optimization. Legitimate techniques that marketers use to try to get their malware listing hosted on some website to the top of those search engine results. So if I'm searching for recipes for soup, the search results give me recipes for soup, I click recipesforsoup.exe, I'm not paying attention, and I execute that. This is a really tough method for defenders to try to prevent, because of course, we're all going to use search engines.
We focus a lot on identity, because that's kind of your way into the cloud. We're venturing more into stuff or activity that occurs in SaaS applications, and what you can do about that, simply because those identities are also going to give you access to SaaS applications potentially. For maybe the first time ever, since we've been doing this, we got 2 net new techniques in our top 10. One of them was email forwarding rules. So we're seeing a lot of adversaries getting access to like Microsoft Outlook in organizations' environments, and then creating email forwarding rules. And it happens to employees, but it also happens on a bigger scale with like dealing with vendors, where you try and switch the bank account that the vendor's using so that you can basically steal the payments for whatever service they're providing. Cloud accounts is the other technique that jumped into the top 10. So the reason it's so surprising is that just doesn't happen that much. When you get down to that lowest level, those techniques, which are the behaviors that adversaries are leveraging in an environment, they're always pretty static. So when new things emerge, it's very interesting, and it's often driven by factors that are outside the control of adversaries.
One of the things that surprised me about this year's threat detection report was our number 1 threat, charcoal stork. As the name suggests, it's a color plus a bird, so this is a red canary named activity cluster. We first started tracking it when we saw this common file name, your file is ready to download.exe. And the odd thing about it is no one else in the community was really tracking it. Sometimes people were calling it Chrome Loader, which is actually the payload this cluster delivered sometimes. What we found as we started naming this cluster and tracking it is that it was everywhere. We saw this in dozens and dozens of environments. These adversaries were making use of search engine optimization and malvertising to get into a whole bunch of environments. And it's pretty easy for people to dismiss, this cluster was just delivering adware like Chrome Loader. What we saw is Charcoal Stork actually delivered a bunch of different payloads across the year, some of them more nefarious than just adware.
So as I've been working my way through this report, writing sections, looking at data, looking at detections, I've started to think more than I previously did that migration to the cloud, and particularly all of the implications that come with that, are fundamentally reshaping, the way we have to think about threats and InfoSec and, what adversaries are doing. And the reason for that is that the cloud, it kind of encompasses in a weird way 3 interconnected things, I would say. Like, you've got your stuff in the cloud, right? You've got EC2 instances, you've got databases, a whole variety of diverse things up there. And then you've also got, your identity provider that you are using to access that cloud. So those 2 things are, very closely bound to one another. And at the same time, you've got these SaaS applications, which are probably also in the cloud, but sort of distinct from like your in-house cloud infrastructure. But the point here is that those identities now are probably the juiciest target for adversaries.
We see more and more threats going to the cloud. Adversaries know that we have traditional enterprise networks pretty well covered, and so they're naturally going to go where they know defenders aren't as likely to catch them. This is why I think as a community, it's so important for us to know about techniques. If we can do this, we can improve our visibility, improve how we detect threats in the cloud, and maybe we'll force adversaries to go to some other system or a new environment. Artificial intelligence is the latest trend, and I think as defenders, it's important for us to think about how we can use it to give people superpowers, to help the machines augment human analysis that's always going to be needed. At Red Canary, we've used AI to try to make our detection engineers and our analysts better, to give them the context they need to better detect threats more quickly, more completely.
I think this report is useful for security leaders because it allows them to see from a pretty high level the relatively small subset of things that they should be concerned about, or at least that they should check if they have good defensive coverage for, right? They can look at the list of top threats, they can look at the list of top techniques, they can look at the trends, and then they can take that information and they can go to their security team and they can say, how is our coverage for charcoal stork? How is our coverage for PowerShell? And it allows them to assess what their coverage is for all these things that are likely to impact them. And then from there, either invest in tools to help shore up that coverage, or invest the time of their analysts and their engineers in building better coverage or better security controls.
I think security leaders can use the threat detection report to help them prioritize what to focus on. The reality is that there are so many potential threats out there. And what we've done is really aggregated across all the environments we have visibility into the threats that we see as being most prevalent and impactful. Everyone's bombarded every day with news about the latest 0-day, the latest malware, the latest group, or whatever trend is out there. What we did is looked at actual data. What are the threats that are affecting real enterprises every day?
We're listing the things that they're likely to face in their environment. We are explaining why all of these things are happening, what a threat does, why an adversary leverages a certain technique. And then beyond all of that, we kind of cap off almost every section in this report with extensive actionable guidance on what security teams can do to counteract these threats, including mitigation steps, detection steps, response ideas, how you respond to a given threat. And then also we try to include as much information as we can about what you can do to emulate that threat or technique.
One of the things we're really proud of is that we want to share what logic has worked for us to detect these threats. Throughout the report, in our trends, our techniques, our threat sections, you can find what we call detection opportunities. Anytime an adversary is in your network, that is an opportunity for you to find them. And we've gone through our favorite detection analytics, the ones that help us identify badness every day, and then we've shared pseudo logic, right? Simplified logic that you could then take and implement into an analytic in your own environment.
So the idea here is, tell you about the threat, tell you what to do about the threat, and then give you a tool that will help you go and check if the things you have configured in your security controls are actually effectively detecting or preventing that threat.